Thanks, Ashish, for the opportunity to address fellow entrepreneurs. Um, so I started Netmagic in 1998. Prior to starting Netmagic, I was working in the US. I'd worked for the NSFNet backbone. And actually, my story is not as interesting as the previous speakers. I pretty much stuck to the same thing all throughout. So I only know, my background is in computer networking, and I've pretty much stayed the same way all throughout till now, and possibly for the next few years. However, I will try and share with all of you the journey so far and some of the learnings, and happy to field some questions. Hopefully this would be of assistance to some of you. So as I said, I moved to the after finishing my graduation at IIT Bombay. Like most of my batchmates, went abroad to study, but I'd always knew that I wanted to come back for two reasons. One, I wanted to start my own business, and two, because I wanted to be with my parents. And so it's, again, very boring, cliche, but that is true. And I was very fortunate. I went to Columbia University, and there they were running this project for the NSF. The people within Columbia were involved in a National Science Foundation network project to run the largest backbone of the internet. So I was recruited from campus for that project, and ended up working with the early backbone of the internet. This is before HTTP was invented, and this is in the early 90s, 1991. And we set up the first, what was known at that time, 45 megabits backbone, which is nothing nowadays. Now you have several tens of gigs, hundreds of gigs of backbone capacity. But that was the first large network in the US. It primarily connected universities and government institutions, and then later on became commercial. So that gave me a very solid foundation. Somebody asked about skills. I think in my case, the skills did help in doing what I now do. And then came back to India I always wanted to come back, and so I was there in the early 90s, and the government announced that they're going to privatize, they're going to make the internet sector commercial. They'd not yet privatized the sector. So from 89 to around 95, there was internet in India, but it was only with ERNet, which was the Education and Research Network. It was with certain government institutions as well as some research institutions, but the general public was not exposed to the internet. There was some X.25 email services, X.400 email services and stuff like that. I don't know if you remember those days, but I don't know if any of you remember that. But but there was no real access to internet. So when I was constantly in touch with folks in India, and when the government said that they're going to make internet available to all, I said this is the right time to come back to India, because I always wanted to do something in that space. But they didn't open it up to private companies. So in 95, the government opened up internet. It was only offered through VSNL, or Videsh Sanchar Nigam Limited, and it wasn't available to the rest of the world. So when I came back, one of the first things I did was somehow got in touch with VSNL and became their, like a consultant. I couldn't have worked for a government organization, but there were some forward-thinking guys there, and they gave me an opportunity to become like a technical advisor to them. And I think that was one of my first breaks in India. Not only did it give me some work, some basic fees for my expenses, but it also exposed me to everybody who wanted to leverage the internet. So whether it was people setting up businesses who wanted to take lease lines, or whether it was international players who wanted to collaborate with VSNL. So I owe a very large part of my success for those 3 years when I was consulting to many companies, but mainly to VSNL. It's a different thing that VSNL is my largest competitor today. It's become now TCL, but we still have a very good relation. I'm a very large customer of theirs. But that's how I got my exposure to the IT industry. But when I moved from the US, I just left everything and came here. I didn't have a job. I just thought I'd start on my own. And so first 3 years were tough. But again, thanks to VSNL and others, I managed to overcome that. In 1998, when the government announced that they will allow private players to set up internet-related services, that's when I formed Netmagic. Initially, it was more a consulting role where I got 3-4 like-minded individuals that I met from 95 to 98 to essentially help private ISPs, whether it was Satyam Infoway, which is now SIFI, or Hathway Cable in Bombay, and several others, including Tata's, set up the internet infrastructure. And parallelly, I wrote up a business plan. What I noticed during my initial consulting was everybody was just setting up connectivity, right? They wanted dial-up connectivity or at the most 64K lease line. But the state of their what is known as points of presence were a mess. I had been exposed in the US to much better infrastructure, and nobody was focusing on value-added services to corporates. Nobody was focusing on how we can leverage the internet for corporates. And so I wrote up a business plan. I said, this is a gap that I've identified. Everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody, at that time, the valuations were based on number of eyeballs and number of subscribers. I think to some extent they still are, but so I found a clear niche, clear gap, and decided to exploit that. And so from 98 to end of 99, I approached several people to get funding. I don't think the venture capital community was as vibrant as it is today. And so it was a little difficult at that time to get someone to fund an idea. And of course, I had to think of something which was very, very capital intensive because it involved setting up data centers. Just to let people know, data centers, the kind of capital required is like 25,000 rupees a square foot. And, so there's, it's non-trivial amount of money that is required. It's, but I still felt that there was an opportunity that existed. Nobody had good quality data centers at that time. And so I wrote up a business plan that would involve setting up data centers and use what is known as managed services today to provide value-added services to corporates. And had there been good quality infrastructure in India, possibly I wouldn't have set up data centers. I would have just, our strength was, me and my initial teams, our strength was, services and, understanding networks and systems in detail. But since there was no good infrastructure, we said, let's actually build data centers in India. And so after a series of disappointments from 98 to late 99, where we continued doing consulting and keeping our revenue stream going, but we met most of the people we met were businessmen who wanted to basically take our idea and do it themselves and offer some stock options to us, which is not something I wanted to do. So, including prominent businessmen in Bangalore, but I won't name them. So, so finally in 99, I think it was I was introduced to the founders of Exodus, B.V. Jagdish and K.V. Chandrasekhar. Again, partly because of my association at VSNL, Exodus wanted to connect. They ran data centers in the US. They wanted to connect their, provide connectivity and peering between VSNL and Exodus, and so they had interacted with me a couple of times. And then at a Thai event, I still remember it was, I think, 99 Feb or something, where I was, or December, where I was stuck in fog, going to Delhi at a Thai event. And I met Jagdish. And he, these guys had just become multi-billionaires. Exodus was at its peak, and they wanted to exit. They hired a professional CEO, and they wanted to exit. And so they decided to, Jagdish in particular, who's also from Bangalore, decided to he wanted to fund someone in India who's to do the business that he understood well, which was Exodus. And given my background, he felt that I was the right person. He, at that time, had got hundreds of business plans in a similar area, but even though I didn't have any business background as such, other than doing some consulting, he decided to back me. And I think once, and this was the, when the venture capital industry, as we know today, had really started, it was the start of the dot-com boom. And so VCs wanted to fund anything which had a good domain name, right? And basically, and including my VCs that time, they made some mistakes. My initial investors funded a company called ChaiTime.com, it doesn't exist. which blew up 100 crores in some, I think 6 months or something like that. But anyway, so so VCs wanted to fund anything, and once people knew that Jagdish was backing me, then I had, initially I was going to many investors, I was not getting any headway. They were wondering how, without any capital, I would set up data centers. But once Jagdish decided to back me, then I had to say no to investors. There were so many people who came, and it became. I'm in touch with some of the people I refused, who get upset, whenever they meet me, that why did you not take money from us? So anyway, so things turned, and then we raised our first round of venture capital from eVentures India, and set up our first data center. This was in about 2000, and we set up our first data center in Bombay in November 2000. And Ashish introduced about recessions, and the first quarter we did fantastic business because this was the height of the dot-com boom. The recession in dot-com in India, I think, started a few months after the collapse started in the US. So first 2 quarters were very good. We signed a whole bunch of customers, and because only I think Sifi and Netmagic were the only 2 players at that time that provided data centers. Tata, Reliance, and all didn't have proper data centers. So at that time, when we set this up, the two quarters, very good business, and suddenly the rug was removed from underneath our feet. All the same customers started defaulting on payments. They couldn't pay their bills. We had invested in servers for them. They couldn't pay that. We were stuck with inventories and bad debts. We were still reasonably conservative compared to other companies funded who were occupying billboards. At that time in 2000, I don't know if any of you recall, but every single billboard had some .com or the other, right, on all the billboards whether you went to Bombay, Bangalore, anywhere. I remember somebody, when India launched INDYA, they actually had the front page of Times of India everywhere. So we were still reasonably conservative. We had been reasonably fiscally prudent. We had not wasted our money. But what we didn't do well was that we took exposure on customers. Didn't realize that after a signed contract somebody would default, and so that was a big learning for us. It reached a stage where 2001, and so what also happened is 2001 July, Exodus collapsed in the US. Jagdish and Chandrasekhar had exited Exodus, but Exodus collapsed, and everybody associated us with Exodus, even though we had absolutely nothing to do with Exodus, other than the fact that Jagdish and Chandra, who founded Exodus, were the initial investors, and Kanwal Rekhi were the initial angel investors in our company. But because Exodus collapsed, first people thought data centers were bad, and second, they thought that this company, because it's a subsidiary of Exodus, will collapse. So I had a serious problem going to my initial customers like India Infoline, Bazi.com, all these, these companies were still doing well. I had a serious problem in just telling them that, look, nothing has happened to us, the business is solid, although there were a lot of customers that could not pay bills and we had bad debts. We reached a stage where we were down to, I think, like 50, 60 lakhs in the bank. Now, 50, 60 lakhs in a business where you're doing software or something may be still reasonable amount of money. But 50, 60 lakhs in a data center business where you're spending 20 crores for a data center is nothing. So I had told, and that time nobody no VC wanted or private equity player wanted to touch data centers because Exodus collapsed, Globix collapsed, a lot of these others collapsed. So we went through a really rough period where we had to, if required, one of the customers, I won't name him, actually asked me to send in my financials. So I actually transferred some little bit of money from my parents and others and put it in the bank so that I could show him a statement that, that we had over 1 crore in the bank. So anyway, that happened. We knew within 12 months of our first data center, we knew we were operationally break even. That's the beauty of the business. Although from a capex perspective, it takes a very long time to recover. But and in the first round, we had raised 18 crores, so we didn't recover 18 crores in 12 months. But we, from what we were spending every month to what we were receiving every month, we had already turned break even. So we knew that if we just stuck it on, we would survive. And fundamentally, the data center business was very strong. Fundamentally, it's a form of outsourcing, and there is just value in outsourcing. The reasons that the companies in the US collapsed was because they did foolish things fiscally. They took large debts. They had a large exposure to dot-com companies, and they tried to build. They were beaten up by analysts for not building fast enough. They were beaten up by analysts for, saying, oh, your data centers are getting full. You're not building 10 other data centers fast enough. And suddenly, when the dot-com, they took $4-5 billion of debt to build 20 new data centers, and suddenly the 20 data centers that they had 50% unoccupancy because the dot-coms collapsed. And so that's the reason they failed, not because of the fact that the business is bad. So anyway, we gradually built it. I'll fast forward a little bit. From 2001 to 2006, we were a single data center company in Bombay, and what we did from a product innovation perspective is added more and more value-added services pertaining to storage, security, load balancing, mail, basically infrastructure-related services, but just so that we could get incremental revenue from our existing customers. One of the issues I had, so I had a co-founder who was also the chief operating officer of the company, and he was very, very conservative. And one of the good things in his being conservative is that we survived the 2000 slowdown, right? I think his fiscal prudence actually helped us in surviving that slowdown. But in 2005, 2006, especially in 2005, when we saw the market turning and we felt that we should do investments, his fiscal, his conservative nature actually started coming in the way, and there were frequent clashes. Not personal clashes. We're still very good friends, but there were lots of differences of opinion. It started sending wrong signals to our employees. They were getting confused, which way to go, because I would say one thing, he would say another. Finally, we said, and somebody said in the morning that, work should be fun. Actually, for that 6 months, work was not fun, I think, either for him or for me, because we would feel every morning coming to work, oh, again, today we're going to clash. Finally, we decided, I took certain decisions which he didn't approve of, so he threatened to resign, and I accepted his resignation. And so 2006, he moved out, and then I felt that we had to build the company more aggressively. Again, I don't want to paint a negative picture of this person. I think he did a fantastic job for our company, and also we're still very close friends, and he did if it hadn't been for his conservative nature, I don't think we would have survived the first recession. But then we decided, we have to invest, we have to move much faster than we are. And from 2006 onwards, we decided to plow back whatever earnings. I think we had accumulated about 20 plus crores in the bank by 2006 in terms of savings, and we basically built, put up a plan to build new data centers, and we built 2 small data centers, one in Bombay and one in Bangalore. So 2007 April, these data centers went live, and but till then we had never worked out of one. We had only worked out of one office in Bombay. We didn't even know what it took to handle multiple offices, let alone manage multiple data centers. But we took that leap of faith. We set up 2 data centers, and actually, if anybody understands the data center business, 5,000 square foot is not really the right size of data center to make, because you need, it's like when you take a TCP/IP packet, you have a large overhead. If your packet size is small, the header is a very large overhead. Similarly, in a data center, if you have a small footprint, then all the associated costs get spread over a very small area. But we didn't have money for more than that, and still I don't think the VC community was still ready to fund data centers. So we said, let's expand, and let's maybe set up 5,000 square foot modules across the country. And so we set up these 2 data centers, and then I think by then data centers had started becoming hot in the US, and then the VC community in India realized that data centers are hot, and so the same VCs who didn't want to touch us in 2001 to 2006 started approaching us. I still remember one of the top name VCs approached us, and I just didn't even bother meeting them, saying that doesn't even make sense. I'm going to go through the whole process, and then you're going to say no or something. But then we realized that if we wanted to expand, we absolutely needed capital, and we then, after setting up these 2 data centers in Bombay and Bangalore, so we had a total of 3 data centers. We then went out in the market to look for money, and we're fortunate to get money from Nexus and Fidelity. And Nexus, I didn't know that Naren was here. I just saw that Nexus is actually one of the main sponsors. So Naren's team in Bombay, actually what they did was Nexus first acquired eVentures. So the initial stake that eVentures had in Netmagic also is with Nexus, and so they did a follow-on round, and we got a new round from Fidelity. The reason we took Fidelity was that they had a smooth ride, and they've been, I think, very professional. From both, even on our board, I think our board meetings have become very, very meaningful and very, very useful. A lot, you're looking at your business in one particular way, and when an outsider gives you perspective on where you're doing things wrong, it really adds value. So, so that's up to 2008, and then that's when we raised money from Fidelity, and the second recession hit. The second recession was not as bad because we by then had a very large recurring revenue base, and our customers were doing pretty well, right? So they cut down costs, so obviously it impacted us, but it also was a positive because a lot of people who built captive data centers didn't want to spend capex and were prepared to outsource to people like us to kind of get their projects that were important to take off from the ground. And so it was a double-edged sword, but it kind of worked out okay for us. It did put some pressure because when we had some of our largest customers cutting down, in our business, being a recurring revenue business, you're always looking at, okay, you add a new customer and your revenue run rate goes up, and you don't factor more than a 5% churn. But suddenly, the existing customers started cutting down. But fortunately, a lot of new customers came, and so it wasn't a significant impact. But what did happen was, again, nobody wanted to touch a capital-intensive business. We would have potentially added at least another data center if at that time things were not small, because we were supposed to do our, Fidelity and Nexus were supposed to do round B of the funding. So they had done it in 2 tranches. And we raised 60 crores, and we had an option to raise some more money, but they only put in the first tranche. They didn't want to take a chance, because at that time, I remember stock market went from some 21,000 to 8,000 or something like that. So, the valuations were, how could you value a company? And so I think, I don't blame them at all. If I had been in their position, maybe I would have thought the same way. They didn't want to do that. So it was a minor blip compared to what we went through in 2001. This was nothing. And so we weathered 2008. Fortunately, markets turned 2009, 2010. And we felt that, then our investors started talking about potentially going IPO. And we said, look, we wanted one more round with strategic investors. And so we raised money in last year from Cisco and Nokia. So Fidelity and Nexus also did a follow-on round, and we did Cisco and Nokia. The reason we wanted strategic investors is we wanted, not that our existing investors didn't get us business. Nexus has funded a lot of portfolio companies that host with us. But we wanted something more strategic. And we found Cisco reasonably strategic because they wanted to get into, so if you look at the Cisco, IBM and HP are doing complete outsourcing from customers. So they not only take the server component, they also take the entire data center component, server, network, and services. Whereas Cisco was only focusing on the network. And so Cisco recently launched their, what is known as the UCS platform. So they got into the server business, and they wanted somebody in the services side that understood this whole thing and could provide these services, use their equipment and provide these services. So that was their strategy. And for us, it was an advantage, although we are still carrier neutral as well as vendor neutral. Our core, for example, is not running Cisco, it's running Foundry. And we're not obliged to buy Cisco gear. But what we agreed with Cisco is that if they brought us business, right, then obviously for that business we'll use their equipment. It's not my sales team bringing it, it's their team bringing us business, we would use it. So that way it became a little strategic, and it's worked out very well for us so far. Some of the other challenges we went through, so that was till recent, this was about 6-7 months back, Cisco and Nokia invested. And now we've now built, totally we have 6 data centers. We've set up 3 new ones, one in Bombay, one in Chennai, and a new one coming up in Noida. are much larger data centers because now we have access to capital. We're no longer building 5,000, now we're building 20,000, 30,000 square foot data centers. Some of the challenges we've gone through, other challenges which I don't know if, I think most of you won't encounter hopefully, are regulatory challenges. So to do this business, we had to set up an ISP license. We need an ISP license because we're technically selling bandwidth to people who host with us. And the ISP license norm, although that's one license where you don't need to know anybody in the government, you just apply and you get it right away. There's no fees. There's just a bank guarantee acquired. So getting the license was easy. But the government had one clause in it which said that they could change the license whenever they want. They could insert any condition whenever they want and you had to abide by it. And the kind of draconian changes they've made in the garb of national security, maybe some of it is genuine, but is amazing. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. If Naren is not in this room, right? Anyway, even if he is, it's fine. So, because I've not yet disclosed this to last week I got a letter from DOT that if there is malware found in my routers and that ends up, let's say, doing something to someone, then I'm liable for 50 crores. So these are the kind of conditions that ISPs have. So they put in, and all kinds of stupid things. They want you to capture every single data packet that goes through your network for I think 6 months or 1.5 years. Things that even government's own ISPs like BSNL and all cannot. So we're not worried. We said, look, if there is a problem due to this, we'll find out. We will deal with it. But I wonder how anybody else will also. And so there were some challenges like regulatory challenges that we've encountered. There were other challenges. I think a lot of the challenges that we encountered, I think, have been addressed by the previous speaker. So I don't think it makes sense for me to repeat them. One of the other things I've done differently, and I don't know if it's the right thing or not, only time will tell, is very often there's a conflict. Do you think from your heart or you think from your mind or brain or whatever? I actually choose thinking from the heart as the answer. So I'll give you an example. We recently had a very large customer wanting to, where we were doing some remote infrastructure management in addition to providing data center services. They wanted to continue his data center business with us, but the dedicated team that we had set up to manage his infrastructure all over the world, because of various reasons, he wanted to take that in-house. So that was our team, and we could have just played hardball and told him that, and he's been with us for 8 years. We could have played hardball and told that customer, look, tough luck. You want to do the business in-house, fine, but go and hire your own team. And he would have lost that entire experience that this team had gained over a period of time. But I took a call saying that, look, this customer has given us enough business for 8 years. He genuinely has a problem. And so even if it means loss of revenue, let him take the team. And made sure, of course, that the team was well taken care of. And took that call and allowed that business to go. The customer, of course, gave us some termination notice, so it was not that the business went overnight. But several times I've done that because I believe if you do that, in the long run it pays. Short term it may look bad, but in the long run I'm sure this company will give us more business. And so that was another thing that I've done. Again, there may be some healthy differences with my investors on these grounds where some people think that you should cut costs. We had another case where we had hired a lot of people for a project which didn't really take off, and I have never laid off a single person in Netmagic. A couple of people have lost their jobs if they've not performed consistently. So we've obviously taken some strict measures there, but very few. I mean, most of the team that we have has been excellent. So when we hired these people and the project didn't take off, again, the natural choice would have been just ask them, give them a notice and ask them to go. But I didn't. We absorbed them. We took a hit on our bottom line for some time, but in the event, eventually the decision paid off because we put so much effort in hiring these guys, and as our business was growing, we figured out a way to accommodate that team somewhere else. So those have been some of the challenges. Product. So one of the things I find in India is product management is something that, again, if it's maybe a little too early stage, if you're too early stage, then this may not be as relevant right now, but it will eventually become relevant. I think one of the weakest things in India is product management. And I think Bangalore might be an exception, but the level, when you look at a product from the US, and you look at the detailed specifications, what the product can do, can't do, how it's engineered, what needs it's meeting. I think what we found in India is that, and I think we are doing a much better job than a lot of other companies, because we have right from day one, we had a product management team and we had these spec sheets. But I think a lot more can be done when it comes to product management. That's one challenge that we face. I think we need to do. Again, deadlines is another challenge. I think another speaker in the morning spoke about deadlines are a must. You can't just miss by 3 months. It's something that I think in India, the attitude is generally, fine, there's a deadline, we'll try, but nobody takes deadlines as seriously as they should. Another thing that we realize is we're now facing a different set of challenges. Now these are the growth challenges. So we used to always say we didn't worry about our traditional competition, which was Tata, Reliance, and all these large telcos, because we said, look, we have something they don't, which is agility and nimbleness. And so a lot of companies look for agility and nimbleness. And so we realized that, look, this is something that we can encounter, we can overcome. But now as we are growing, I was just at Flipkart yesterday, and I was told by Flipkart, look, their business is growing so fast that we are not able to keep pace. So it made me think that, look, we've come so far, we shouldn't lose that edge. And so, one of our challenges is how do we continue to grow, where you have to bring processes in, but still not lose the efficiency that you're encountering. Again, earlier, our challenge was competing with the big boys, telcos in India. A lot of people didn't give us a chance that you'll survive, because how can you compete with people with billions of dollars, and you are just venture backed. And now our challenge is even more, because now we are into cloud computing, and we're competing with the likes of Amazon, Rackspace, and Google. So now it's no longer restricted to India. The challenges are now far, far greater than what we had earlier. But it's interesting. So the fun is still there, and now we are motivated even more, having tasted success, the company growing well. So basically now, I still plan to continue. I mean, irrespective of whether we go public, irrespective of whether we get another investor, I still plan to continue in the business. Maybe when that, as somebody said earlier, if the fun goes, I'll look at something else later. But right now, this is the only business I know. If I leave this, as again somebody said earlier, I don't know if I'll get a job, and I don't know anything else to do. So I've just stayed with this right throughout, and that's what I wanted to share. Be happy to field any questions.
Around cloud computing and how the whole enterprise application world is evolving here in India. Obviously, you have some very, very big clients, but seems to me they are much more kind of online companies in nature. Have you seen, or are you seeing a lot of shift in kind of more bricks and mortar company that want to move into the cloud, and they're allowing, they're buying some SaaS applications or some other things, and they're willing to host in an environment like yours? Because from an outsider's perspective, it seems like that could be the other major big growth booster for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And we thought when we got into cloud, so let me share with you some interesting things about cloud. We thought, first I was the biggest skeptic myself before I got into it. I said, look, I want to make sure that this makes money, right? Today, if you look at Amazon, they themselves have said in their balance sheets that they're going to make a 4 to 6% margin. I don't want to work in a business where I'm competing with them and make 4 to 6% margin. So it took us a lot of effort to convince from a business perspective that, look, there is bottom line in this, and it's not just 4 to 6% if you execute right. Initially we thought, and so we have two types of customers. We have internet-centric companies, which you mentioned, and we also have the traditional enterprises who, for example, host their SAP servers or the core banking solutions and things like that. And when we started cloud, we thought, so first we had our sales team got upset. They said, look, you have so many dedicated servers. What if all the dedicated server customers convert to cloud? So the way, because then you have revenue loss per customer. But I said, that's fine, because the revenue per square foot goes up. See, today, my biggest challenge is the amount of square feet, right? Because that's what is capital intensive. And if I can pack in more customers in the same, the revenue per rack goes up. And so So to answer your question on whether these traditional enterprise or brick and mortar companies are adopting, it was a big surprise to us. We also thought it'll be internet startups, it'll be people wanting to do test and development, and it'll be at the most disaster recovery. Because, so a lot of the brick and mortar companies and other companies are using cloud for disaster recovery, because you can have a DR setup without having to invest the same amount of capex, and you can have a base plan. And if you take an elastic plan from either Amazon or us or anybody else, then you only pay for the surge when you use it, right? And so that is definitely one application of a traditional brick and mortar that we see on the cloud. There have been some other interesting applications. A lot of the newer applications that even traditional enterprises are doing, they're doing on cloud. A lot of the customer facing, of course, they're doing on cloud, but even otherwise, they're looking at, so a lot of them, see, the issue is not cloud, because you can have a public cloud and you can have private cloud, but the issue is more multi-tenancy. So a lot of banks, for example, wouldn't want a multi-tenanted environment because of their security norms, right? Some of it is, I think, will change over a period of time, because I think it's a perception. I think that as technology advances more, even the public cloud will be very secure. It's already becoming more and more secure. So there are challenges. I'm not saying security is a non-issue, but it's also a lot of perception. So I think over a period of time, you'll see a lot more companies move to the public cloud, but already there are companies setting up private clouds in the traditional enterprise as well, and even doing hybrid. So they set it up in their own premises and they set up some in a public data center. So you've seen early signs of that as well.
They say the real growth starts after the IPO, if you choose to do it. Where do you see yourself going in 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Anything is it a known unknown for you, or do you have some thoughts where you want to be and you're trying to get to?
Yeah. Thanks, good question, because I don't think I know for sure where we are going to be, but I'll give you some kind of idea. So people asked us, and we it's not all been a smooth journey, as I've said, right? We made mistakes. So one of the mistakes we made in 2007 was that we said, we only got India business, 90% of our revenues from India, why don't we set up an office overseas? And we set up an office, and I'll connect why I'm saying this in a minute. So we set up an office in the US. While that got us some very good accounts, what I realized, and what my investors also made me realize, was that the amount of money that we're spending there to get that business, if we spend that same money in India, we got much more bang for the buck. So we kind of brought the team back, and we continued to continue to expand in India. One of the things I do want to do in the future is at least expand the cloud offering overseas. So not necessarily build data centers overseas, because there's already good data center space available, but at least expand the cloud offering overseas. We've already started with something known as, we're trying to do white labeling. So we're initially targeting, and this is where again Cisco is helping us. They're getting their service providers who have who are traditionally buying Cisco gear, so they don't mind buying UCS, etc., but they don't have the glue layer, that the orchestration to make the cloud, automated provisioning, etc. So we are doing that we're trying to do the white labeling. So we do want to take this overseas, so definitely make it into a global company. That I know for a fact. I don't think we'll significantly deviate from what we're doing in terms of core focus. We'll probably stay in the same area. We'll obviously add more services, we'll do more alliances, partner with more platform as a service and software as a service partners, which we've already done. We've partnered with this company called OrangeScape in Chennai, and a few others that we've done. So we'll build that ecosystem, but I don't think it'll be significant deviation from what we're doing right now, but hopefully expand to a global footprint. Yeah, there's a question there.
But your client would definitely want something more.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting point. So when we have these regular DOT audits, vigilance audits, and this is one point, fortunately, even the DOT auditor doesn't know how to solve. So yes, you're absolutely right. As per the ISP license, if your client is using more than a 40-bit key, then you're supposed to deposit it with the government, right? But so what we did was, we didn't even bother about it earlier, but when we had our first, and they do like once in 2 years or something, there's a vigilance guy who comes and wants to make sure you're not doing some illegal voice business, etc. And so he comes, he looks at everything. And so one of the things he pointed out is, as per this clause, you're supposed to not have more than 40-bit keys. So first of all, that's the most foolish thing on earth. The ISP license is filled with foolish things, which because your babus don't understand how this business works, and they try to put arbitrary constraints. How do you deposit a dynamically changing key, right? And every single guy, every single equipment, every single guy is using 128-bit at least, if not higher. How would net banking working, right? And so then what we did was we did something simple. We said, fine, we'll answer them back in the same coin. So we told this vigilance guy, please tell us, and we'll write to all our customers, and we'll deposit the keys. So he said, you go to the licensor. So I wrote a letter to the licensor, I still have it on record, saying, please tell me how I should process on how I should deposit static keys and dynamic keys, right? I never got a response back. But I have it on my file that I've responded to that query. Next time we had a vigilance audit, we showed them that letter, they didn't bother us. So they themselves don't know what to do with the keys. That's the funny part. But they have these stupid things. There's all kinds of, it's actually, I figured, so I'll give you another important, talk about challenges. So Bazi.com was hosted by us when Avnish got arrested. I don't know if you remember that case. He did nothing wrong, okay? The clip was not even there. There was an MMS clip that was not even there on the servers. It was, some buyer said that if you want to buy this clip, pay me money and I will. Some seller said if you want to buy this clip, pay me money and I'll send you the CD. And it was there, it came on Saturday and was removed on Monday. So that was the extent of his so-called crime. And they wanted to shut, they wanted to, not only did they arrest him, but they also wanted to shut down his servers. Fortunately, they didn't. I mean, they didn't. I was worried that they might shut down all my entire data center, but they didn't. And so there are all these kind of stupid things. Fortunately, thanks to Avnish and that case, they've changed the law. So earlier, the service provider had to prove his innocence. Now, the service provider has to be proven guilty, number one. And number two, you're given enough time to remedy the situation. So you're not enough time, but you're given some time to remedy the situation. So over a period of time, these challenges kind of solve themselves. Of course, I hope we don't have to ever go to jail to overcome that. But that's one risk in our business. They can come and seize anything they want anytime. Sometimes you see our contracts and they have some clauses with the customers, and customers might wonder why these clauses are there. It's precisely for these kind of situations.
Okay, we'll take one more question. One thing which was underlying is the VC's part. And you told a lot of stories on how you said no to someone and the VC said no to you. One thing which I'm very curious about, and I know there's no right answer to it, there's no right formula. What clicked? Was it the right term sheet? Did your vision for the business match? What was? Did you have to compromise on one thing?
Yeah. So I'll just qualify that a little. So in the first round, when we said no, it was because if it had the same VCs whom we said no to had said yes a few months before that, we would have probably taken it because they would have been the only ones who said yes. When we said no, it was obviously we couldn't take money from everyone. We had to select. And so what clicked with eVentures was just the people that I met. So it was Neeraj Bhargav, Sandeep Singhal, these kind of guys who are now part of, Neeraj Bhargav ran WNS and now thought I'll get some business for them. And sure enough, we did get, a lot of these companies, Snapdeal, others are all Nexus portfolio companies, and a lot of them host with us. So it was a combination of, not only getting money, but also getting intellect. Neeraj and Sandeep were at McKinsey Partners before they started. They're very, very sharp guys. Sandeep is like an IIT entrance topper. He's Stanford and Wharton. So I felt that, I've learned a lot from him, and he's, I think, contributed the maximum in our company's growth till now. As a board member and as an advisor, so the basic thing was the chemistry between us. And also the fact that they would hopefully fund other companies that would host with us. Those are the two reasons I chose them. In the second round, it was, we wanted a strategic player who could, something, that's why we took Cisco. Although both Cisco and Netmagic didn't want to take each other earlier because we are a vendor neutral company and a carrier neutral company, and Cisco does so much business with service providers that they can't be favoring one service provider. So it kind of, but we took a very small amount. It was, I think, $5 million that we took from Cisco, and it wasn't a very large amount compared to the round that we did. And so then they also said it's okay, and we also, said it doesn't alter anything. They don't even have a board seat. So we then went ahead, and sure enough, they've introduced us to service providers in Asia Pac, for white labeling. They bought a lot of hosting ourselves because for their customers, when they offer a turnkey deal, they do education as a service, they do WebEx as a service, they do a lot of other things. Some of those things are hosted with us. So it kind of worked out in both cases.